This is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're exploring the transit systems outside of the New York City area. And we're joined in the studio by Miguel Velázquez, CEO of RTS, which operates in Rochester and throughout the Finger Lakes. And he's also the president of the New York Public Transit Association. Thanks for making the time, Miguel.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate the time.
So, in your testimony on the transportation portion of the budget before the legislature, you made the case that the transit systems outside of New York City are underfunded by current funding models. What are you talking about? Is this a state problem? Is this a local government problem? What seems to be the issue?
Well, it's a state problem from the respective or the perspective, I should say, that most of our funding comes from New York State.
Okay.
So over 50% of Upstate Transit Systems funding comes from New York State. And so therefore, when we are not funded appropriately or to the levels that we need, it's usually we have to turn to the state to help us out.
And when you say not funded appropriately, is this something on the operating side? Is this a capital problem? Or is it one of those wonderful all of the above, we've got issues sort of problems?
I would say, yes, it's all of the above, but I would say our typical and pressure point is on the operating side, is that year-to-year operating funding stream that we need to make sure that we maintain service out on the street.
And when you talk about the needs on the operating side, is this for personnel? Is it for gas? I mean, what is it that you need money for on the operating side?
Yes, so you're absolutely right. It's mostly personnel. 75% of our expenses, it's on the people side, people, wages, and benefits, drivers, mechanics, supervisors, garage managers, all those. That's where most of our expenses in the personnel side. Like I said, 75% in the case of Rochester, and I'm sure it's very similar to other transit agencies as well. And then the other 25%, if you will, is things like gas, our rolling stock, keeping the buses running out on the street, parts, and all of those things make up the other 25%.
So in this conversation about funding for public transit, the thing that we often hear is this idea of, hey, just fund the systems outside of New York City in some sort of parity with what the MTA, which services the New York City and some of the surrounding areas. What does parity look like for you? Because clearly the role that the MTA plays in getting people around New York City is different than any upstate community. So what does parity look like in this conversation?
Yeah, so if I could go back for a second.
Please.
So, underfunded, what that means for us in the case of the upstate transit agencies, right now we're facing structural deficits. Downstate was in this position, I believe, 3 years ago. The state stepped up. They have addressed the funding issues both on the capital side and the operating side for the MTA. We are in upstate and the rest of the state non-MTA systems. We are pretty much in that same position now. Why? Mostly because at this point is when we have exhausted our COVID funds that were provided to us by the federal government. We have seen, obviously, over the last 4 or 5 years since COVID, a huge increase in inflation. We have seen pressures on wages for mechanics and drivers and employees in general in order for us to be able to hire and retain employees. And then supply chain issues, like others have seen as well. The cost of a bus has almost doubled to purchase a bus and maintain those buses. So that's where we are at this point, and that's where we're saying, okay, we need to fix this from a structural perspective, so that we are appropriately funded, and we have a balanced budget. In addition to that, not only we want to have a balanced budget, but our communities are demanding better and more service from us. They want more frequency, they want expanded service, they want expanded hours, they want to expand the geography of our service, how far we go. And so we can only do that at the point where we have a structural balanced budget, and then we can look at those improvements. What has happened is that the upstate and non-MTA, specifically upstate, I'm going to limit my comments for a second on upstate. Our funding streams come from two basic areas. One is from the general fund, and the other is from two dedicated revenue sources. And those two revenue dedicated sources are a fuel tax and a long telephone line tax, both of which are declining.
How old is that second one? A telephone line tax? I mean,
They're-
did Alexander Graham Bell lobby for that one?
so they're both extremely old,
Okay.
as obviously, as you have pointed out, and you got onto that pretty quickly. Um, and so we are depending on those which are declining. On the other hand, downstate MTA and downstate non-MTA system, between the two, they have 18 different dedicated sources of revenue. We only have two, and they are declining.
Mm.
And I'm sorry, we have three actually. There's one car rental tax that went into effect a couple of years ago. We are looking for more dedicated revenue sources.
Like what? What's a good way to potentially funnel money to the upstate systems?
So the one that we are proposing, advocating for at this point, it's a DMV car registration fee of $25 a year.
And does that mean $25 on top of what I already pay for the registration, or would this mean you would get a cut of the registration fees? You would just chop off $25?
No, that would be in addition.
Okay.
So it would be addition to what you pay today, but again, $25 annually. And what is very, very important for me to point out is that this is a fee that it's already in place for the MTA area downstate. And they've had it, I believe, for about 17 years at this point. What we're asking for is equity and parity in extending that fee to the rest of the state. They won't pay any more downstate. They already have it. That will continue. We're just asking that it's replicated so that we have it upstate.
So I'm used to only registering my car, though, every 2 years. So would this be a new additional process of having to register the car every year? Or would you just collect that $25 once every 2 years, so it'd be $50 every 2 years?
Right. So it wouldn't be any additional process. It would be when you go register your car, it would be a $50, again, 25 per year, $50 fee.
And so make that pitch to me, the driver who doesn't use public transit. Why do I want to spend an extra $50 every 2 years, which in the grand scheme of things is a tiny amount over 2 years, but that time I do have to pay it, I'm going to be pretty angry. So what's the case for that funding? What's the reason why I should care?
It's a great question. I would say two things around that. You know, the first thing I would say is when you first hear about this, especially in today's day and age, when everybody's talking about affordability, and you say, well, hold on a second, this goes counter to the affordability argument. And what I would say to that is that the people who use public transit are the people who need affordability the most, if we're fair about it. And so we cannot afford to reduce service. We cannot afford to increase fares to those people who need affordability the most. We are a critical lifeline for those folks. They use us to do critical trips. They use us to go to work. They use us to go to healthcare appointments. They use us to go to school. They use us to go do their groceries. And so affordability, public transit aligns perfectly with the affordability argument. What I would also say, a second thing I would say is that if you were to ask people who do not use public transit in our area, I would guarantee you that most of them would say that we are a critical service, that these are employers who their employees, the only way they get to their jobs is because of us. That the service that we provide for people with disabilities, for our aging population, people who don't drive anymore, the critical service that we provide, even though you specifically may not use it, you see the value and the critical service that we provide.
So you're talking, though, about a statewide fee, and there are parts of the state where there is no public transit, and there are other parts of the state where the public transit system is just not useful, and so there are going to be low-income people who only can use a car. So why is this the best way to fund something like this as opposed to something that is even more progressive, like some sort of income tax surcharge or something else that is more targeted for the people who can afford it? Because yes, there are probably people who are driving and can afford this with no problem, but is there any way to make this even more targeted?
So there certainly is, and let me first say that there's only 2 counties in the entire state that don't have some sort of public transit service. So basically everybody, mostly everybody, will benefit from this. So
There's a difference, though, between it existing and it existing in a useful form for people, though, right?
I would agree, and I guess that reinforces our argument that to appropriately and fairly fund public transit will help us make it
Sure.
even, more useful for folks. I don't disagree with you at all. I think that's precisely our argument is we need more money so we can make this a useful, convenient, reliable form of transportation for folks. Um, to your second piece of the question, yes, there are other options. We've always posed the different options on what could be used as a dedicated source of revenue. At the end of the day, it's not up to NIPTA as an association or a transit system to say which one should be used. We just come up with options and proposals, and we put these options out there. And this is one that, at this point seems to be gaining some
Mm.
support. Again, mostly because it's already in place downstate. We're just asking that it be replicated because, it's working for downstate. So why not use it for us as well? But I think you bring up a good point. There's other sources as well, and those should be always be looked at.
And what about the capital side of things? Is there any sort of request that you've got from state policymakers? Is there any sort of dedicated funding stream there that you're looking for, hoping for a new casino that maybe their license money can go to you guys, for example?
So capital is also a need. We are asking, we're very thankful, grateful for the governor in her budget putting $100 million that she put last year. She again put it this year. Our ask has been to add another $200 million, so we're halfway there.
Because those buses are getting more expensive, I heard.
Buses are getting way more expensive. Our facilities are, in many cases, in a state of disrepair, and we need new facilities, whether it's an upgrade or relocation of facilities. And so, that capital need is definitely there. And as we move to zero emission, a transition to zero emission, that transition is very, very expensive as well. From a capital perspective. And so, yes, we are also asking for increases in the capital funding as well.
Are you looking for any sort of relief from any sort of emissions goals or requirements? Because we've heard from the MTA about their green transition may not be on target and is definitely more costly than they expected. So is that a challenge for you guys as well, and something where you're looking for some relief?
It is a challenge. Fortunately, knock on wood, specifically in Rochester, we are right now on a timeline that would get us to be able to fulfill the governor's mandate of being zero emission by 2040. I'm not saying that something may not happen because, again, from an expense or a cost perspective, it's very expensive, and these are new technologies. These are brand new technologies. We are experiencing, our fair share of issues with some of them, but again, we're still on target to meet that. So we haven't. I won't say that we are not necessarily advocating for some relief, but it is tight and it is hard to meet that deadline.
Well, we've been speaking with Miguel Velázquez. He's the CEO of RTS in the Finger Lakes and is the president of the New York Public Transit Association. Miguel, thanks so much for visiting us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to today's edition of the Capitol Press Room. For an insider take on what's happening in state government, check out our Dispatches from Planet Albany show, available wherever you get podcasts or at capitolpressroom.org.
Join us again for Capitol Press Room, a production of WCNY Connected, Syracuse.